Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I call this meeting to order. Please stand and join me for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you and good morning, everyone. Welcome to this June 20th, 2023 County Board meeting. With that, I would be looking for a motion to approve our regular meeting proposed agenda with one change. I'm going to move the open forum up to number 2, and the consent agenda will move to number 3. So we will do the open forum prior to our consent, as we've done all year, and some of us just missed that as we were putting the agenda together. So with that change, I've heard of no other changes.
So move.
Madam Chair, I'll second that.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Gray, seconded by Commissioner Felber. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion has carried. Thank you. Moving on then to the open forum. Ms. Keisha Broderick.
I have nobody signed up, Madam Chair.
Okay, so no one signed up for open forum today. So moving on to consent agenda item number 3. I have been notified of no changes, but that doesn't mean that anyone doesn't have the ability to pull something at this point. So what is the wish of the board?
Madam Chair, I'll move the consent agenda as presented.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Danielowski. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Commissioner Felber. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion has carried. Moving on to that of announcements. Mr. Dan Weber.
Good
is
morning,
filling in.
Commissioners. This week we only have one announcement. Just a reminder that in July we only have one meeting, and it is an evening meeting on the 18th. Prior to that, we will have our budget workshops on July 17th and then the afternoon and morning of July 18th.
Okay, great. That is it for announcements. Any other announcements? We are running way ahead of schedule.
Just roll one.
Pardon me?
We could perhaps have Diane, since she's in the audience today, start with her regular agenda item on 6.3.
Okay, why don't we do that? Move ahead to item number 6.3. We are celebrating, we're doing employee recognition today, and we have that on here for 9:20. So we're ahead of ourselves. So we are going to move ahead to item number 6.3. Ms. Diane Arnold.
Good morning, Madam Chairman and Commissioners. Before you in your packet was my monthly May report for our financial report for June or for May. So you've got there is the May trial balance or the balance sheet that we've got, and this is just a comparison as to how our balances, our fund balances were from May of 2022 to May of 2023. And as you can see that we are a little bit ahead in the general fund, so that is good. We are showing, I just wanted to note out too, we have a deficit in our school districts because we had to pay out the settlement for a school district, and then that comes out of taxes and penalties. That's 81. So that'll get dispersed out to all of the funds and the taxing authorities. Actually, it's getting worked on right now, and that should be going out this next week. So also wanted to let you know that on June 2nd, my office sent out our late notices. It was 1,296 parcels, whereas the first half real estate taxes have been unpaid. That was down from our 2022 mailing by 164 parcels. And people are appreciative for the notice, although frustrated by the post office and the timeliness in which the payments are received by the county when they were sent with ample time to get here. And just due to the postmarks and how they're doing their process now, it's very frustrating for people when they say they put it in the mailbox on the 15th and they don't get postmarked. So we're just trying to work through that. We do put notices on, in the paper. I put it on our website. I try to get everything out there that we can. We have had a big increase in people signing up for automatic withdrawal for their property taxes. So that reminder, we send them out a notification when it's going to happen, and it does. We do the withdrawal on the 15th. So we've had a lot more people sign up for that, which I think is going to be beneficial.
Diane, I just had a quick comment.
Yes.
You might want to let people know, walk into the post office and have them hand stamp it. That's what I always do with anything that has a,
Right. A lot of post
Deadline on
offices
it.
will not do that anymore.
Really?
Elk River will not.
wow, that's too
Yeah.
bad. Tell them, so far Big Lake is, but
Right. I think the smaller post offices, I found that they will do that, you know, if you request it. But some of the bigger ones, they will not. So, but thank you for that. Yes, I know we encourage people to get them in ahead of time. So, moving on to the next report in here, after the balance sheet report, is our treasurer's financial report, our cash balance, our collections, our year-to-date, and our disbursements year-to-date, along with our interest that we have earned. So right now, we are above our interest that has been budgeted for the year by $511,000, which is good. Our interest rates in our Magic are very good right now, so we're trying to utilize that as much as we can. The following sheet on there is the summary of the deposits and investments as of May 31st, 2023. So that's where we've got all of our money that is invested. So right now, we have an average interest rate in our government pooled funds, a Magic is 5%, which we haven't seen that in years and years. So we're, like we said, we're happy to see that. We also do a comparison from 2022 to 2023 as to where our investment allocations are being put in. The following page on there is our locations as to where our funds are being housed and where they are being invested. The additional page is the executive financial budget to actual review, and this is our modified accrual, and this is for the budget to actual as to revenues and expenditures coming in as to what the budget is. As you can see down on the bottom, we do have, for the general revenue under property tax, we have a negative in there, and that was due to a tax court filing, so we had to pay out. We had a tax court that had won their case in there, so we had to pay out property taxes to do a reimbursement back to the business. So that should be changing. The next month, you'll see positive numbers in there. If there is, let's see if there's anything else I have in here. Oh, also, I wanted to let you know, on the consent agenda, we did have a request in there for the request to apply for our GFOA for 2022. We're getting close. We're wrapping up our audit and working on the transmittal letter and the MD&A. And right now, we did get information about our population for 2022. It's reported at 100,824. So that's a 1.58% increase from 2021 number of 999,248. So I have not been informed as of yet by any local governments who are challenging any of their estimates, and they have until the 24th of June in which to do so. And then the 2022 estimates cannot be made public until after July 15th. And they do for each of the entities. So that'll be
that's by
coming.
jurisdiction.
Correct, by jurisdiction. Yep, exactly. So does anyone have any questions or additional things they'd like to have explained out of the
Madam
report?
Chair.
Commissioner Halls.
Just a quick question. On the automatic withdrawal that is available, is that only for the two payments, or can they do alternative payment methods?
That's just for the two payments. That's just for the two. And we do accept partial payments, but then they would have to they'd have to be on their own to send them in or drop them off or whatever if they want to do partial payments on there.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Danielowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. Can you refresh my memory on how do we go about deciding where our local investments happen?
So our local investments are based on our investment policy that we have. And in there, we've utilized our local banks, and then Magic is our PFM is the main one that everything is housed through. So we haven't gone, we've gone out to other smaller entities and banks, but they just could not match the interest rates. They couldn't, so we're trying to maximize what we can. We utilize two of the banks in Elk River. But
And
we have
that's-
gone out to other banks, and they just haven't materialized, as far as being able to offer us.
And how often do you do that check?
We look at that periodically. I mean, each year we kind of take a look at that to see, and we send out, information as to what they can kind of do for us. So we do check with them.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
And I know some local surrounding counties have pulled out of Magic totally, or during the pandemic they did.
Oh,
I know, and I remember choosing to just stay in there, hold
Yep.
fast, and it's really proven to be a wise,
yep, it has been.
you really benefit from that. So, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, then I would be open to a motion to accept the May 2023 financial report from the Auditor Treasurer's Office.
So moved.
Motion made by Commissioner Halls,
I'll second.
seconded by Commissioner Danielowski. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion has carried.
Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. We're going to try to now take in item number 6.5, consider and approve the host fee rates for Elk River landfill with Mr. Dave Lucas. We do have staff here, also from Waste Management, so we can perhaps take this item and then move up to our recognizing anniversaries. So, welcome, Mr. Lucas.
Morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. So, in your request for board action is a set or proposed rates for 2024 through 2030 as provided in our host fee agreement. When this went out, we received a request from Waste Management that we extend that deadline. The deadline is, thank you. Our existing host fee agreement provides for a current schedule that runs through the end of this year. And language in the host fee agreement provides that the county sets or designates rates for 2024 through 2030. So when that went out to Waste Management, they contacted us and asked if the county would be willing to extend that deadline from July 1st to August 1st. We put together a resolution. Tim Simon, the county attorney's office, sent that out, and we have, and I will hand that out to you.
They already have copies there, Dave.
You already got a copy? Okay.
Thank you.
So it's staff's recommendation that the board pass this resolution, and it provides for additional time to discuss those fees with Waste Management. And as you know, and I've explained before, host fees are in lieu of statutory fees that the board can set, and there's a surcharge. We already collect a Greater Minnesota Landfill Cleanup Fee. There's an Industrial Solid Waste Trust Account deposit, and construction and demolition fees. So the host fees are for MSW, industrial solid waste, construction and demolition waste in lieu of certain statutory fees.
Okay, thanks, Dave. So we do have Waste Management here, staff, and they have seen this amendment and agreed to this amendment. So any questions or comments from the board, or are you ready to act on the amendment?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the amendment as presented.
Okay, motion's made by Commissioner Danielowski. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Commissioner Felber. Any other questions or comments? Administrator Messelt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. I just want to publicly thank Mike and Waste Management. They originally flagged to us the need for board action. We actually had read it as through July, and so because of that, we wanted to take action today, but we haven't had a chance to really have a conversation. So giving us the month to do that is going to be really helpful. And again, I just want to publicly acknowledge and thank Mike for doing that.
Agreed, yes.
Okay, any other questions from the board? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion has carried. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, now that takes us back up to item number 5.1, and this will take us over to the staff lunchroom lounge, where we will have our employee recognition, which we do twice a year. So follow us over there. One is to receive a legislative session recap from the Minnesota Intercounty Association. So we welcome today Matt Mossman, Nancy Selesky, and Steve Novak. And I am aware that we have a new board since you were here last year. We have some new board members, so just want to make sure we have proper introduction. So Andrew Halls on the end here represents Elk River, City of Elk River area. Rayanne was here, and Greg Felber represents Becker area and Becker Township, Oric Township, so some rural. Yeah, a little part of Elk River. And Gary Gray is the rest of the west. Half of the county. Half of the county, the biggest agricultural part. So welcome to all of you. We look forward to this session recap.
Well, thank you, Chair Fabian. Matt Mossman, Executive Director of the Intercounty Association. Pleased to be up here again, a beautiful day to drive up to Elk River this morning. Thank you for your continued membership in the association. You know, for new members, I think just a real quick background, the Intercounty Association is, I think, 52 years old now. Really grew back when it originally was formed out of conversations in the metro area, and very shortly after that to conversations among the larger counties in the state, just where they have somewhat more synthesized or shared interest at the legislature in terms of their agendas and interests, and it's been a sustaining coalition since then. So really, Hennepin and Ramsey were originally members of the association and then quickly went their own direction and have in-house government relations. And so since then, Micah has really been the home for all of the large counties in the state other than Hennepin and Ramsey. And I really want to thank Commissioner Fabian, Commissioner Gray for your participation on the MICA Board of Directors. We're governed by 2 county commissioners from each of the 15 member counties make up our Board of Directors, and that's who sets our direction at the legislature. So with that, the 2023 session, if the 2022 session, I joke, was characterized by inaction at the end, the 2023 legislative session could be characterized by nonstop action. It was at times tough for, I think, everybody, but for local governments to keep up. And in the end, the results, I think, were very, very strong for the work of county governments. Let me see, does the clicker, there we go, reach. I just want to recap because it is relevant to the context that we operate in at the Capitol, not only how things began at its session and ended, but also what we will be looking at when we return in 2024. You may recall that the 2022 session ended with about $12.5 billion on the bottom line that was unallocated. That money carried forward and grew such that we started the 2023 session with a projected $17.5 billion surplus. Most of that was one time. There was $5 billion of ongoing positive balance, which is still a very large amount by historic comparisons in the 26-27 period. The actions of the legislature increased revenues on top of that, as well as reduced taxes. Overall, for 24-25, there was a net reduction of about $2 billion in tax revenues and $14 billion of net spending increases for a total of a $65.5 billion budget for the coming biennium, which is 25% higher than the previous biennium. So it's a very large increase from a percentage terms, but it also, a fair amount of that is one-time money, so it drops back somewhat in terms of the growth of the general fund budget for 26 and 27. The only other thing I would point out there is that probably the largest property tax relief package, which shows up as spending on the state ledgers. But the largest property tax relief package in many years at the legislature, probably 20 years, just under $1 billion of net property tax relief for 24 and 25, and we'll touch on much of that.
So Matt, and as you go along, if board members have questions, it's okay if we
Yes,
intersperse? Okay.
that would be good.
Thank you.
So I will try, and I know you've heard some of this before as various associations, as we all try and sort of decompress and pass information along to you. I'll try and point out a couple of timeline elements that are really relevant to the work of county governments as I go through this list also. County program aid, the largest increase in county general purpose program aid that we're aware of, and that's the Department of Revenue confirmed that for me. $80 million of annual increase. That begins next calendar year. Local housing aid. The legislature put a new aid program in place, which will now provide an annual aid amount to each of the 87 counties in the state to support local housing programs. This is housing that will have to follow income-based criteria for the either whether it's it'll be 115% of statewide, the greater of statewide or area median income for projects that are home ownership-based projects, individual residences, and 80% of statewide or area median income for projects that are rental-based projects. And this money is for infrastructure type work, not for the services that sometimes are provided as there's money for that through different programs.
Madam
This
Chair?
money starts in 2023. So this money actually will start this year. Amounts will be certified on an accelerated basis by August 1, and all paid out in one installment for this first year in December.
Okay, Commissioner Danielowski.
Thank you. Just one question, like with the county program aid and some of these other increases in funding that counties will receive, just for people that are watching or listening, that will result in a lowering of property taxes because that helps offset the cost of what the counties do, and that means less money has to be put to the levy.
Yeah, Commissioner, that's a very good question, and exactly. County program aid is a general purpose aid, so you all as commissioners have the option of using it how you choose. Almost every county that I'm aware of in our membership sets their budget and then reduces that amount to lower the levy to get to an amount that's levied. So that's how it shows up on this list as property tax relief.
I just want to make sure we tied that together for the general public's understanding. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. And then quickly going on with the list, soil and water conservation districts, there's a new aid program at $15 million a year for the first 2 years, and then it drops down to $12 million a year. This is not all a net increase in that there has also historically been a clean water fund appropriation of $12 million a year. There's been a longstanding frustration by some, not necessarily shared by everybody, but by some that clean water fund was not the appropriate source for that annual appropriation. So there's been a back and forth. There's now a general fund appropriation for administrative support for soil and water conservation districts at that amount. If you have questions, I can talk about the allocation formulas of any of these as to how it's distributed. And then SCORE grants, for the first time, this has been something that has been on our to-do list for probably a couple of decades that we have made some progress on this session. Back in the 80s, there was a recommendation that came out of waste and recycling being sort of in its infancy in Minnesota that there should be something called a solid waste management tax applied both to residential properties and commercial properties when waste is collected. Those solid waste management tax revenues were always intended to then support solid waste management activities, recycling, reuse, reduction. Unfortunately, since that time, 30% of that money has been going into the state general fund, and we have been trying to get it to SCORE grants. We now have made some progress. 3% of that money will go to SCORE grants to counties, which is about a 20% increase in the amount of money that will go to counties in SCORE grants. So we hope to continue making more progress. But then going on to other forms of property tax relief, and I'll try and move things here along a little bit. There's programs that we follow and support as well because they impact directly, especially your homeowners and renters as levies are set and taxes have been somewhat shifting onto homeowners and other residential properties with the shifts in tax base in the last couple of years. For 2023 only, so this is retroactive for the tax increases that homeowners may have experienced or renters from 2022 to 2023. There will be a one-time enhancement to the renters and homeowner refunds of 20.572%. So whatever a homeowner would otherwise be receiving under their application for a homeowner's refund will go up by 20.57%. Or renters. Then there's also, that's the household, that first line there is refunds that are based on household income. The next line is the program that increased the targeted homeowner refunds. These are the refunds that are not income-based. They're eligible to any homeowners whose taxes go up by more than 12% from one year to the next. The legislature for 2023 only reduced that 12% threshold to 6%. So now any homeowner, regardless of household income, whose taxes have gone up by more than 6% from 2022 to 2023 will be eligible for a targeted refund in this year only. And the maximum refund is up from $1,000 to $2,500 for that 1 year.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Danielowski.
Thank you. So that would be something that a homeowner would have to go in and apply for or contact whoever does their taxes and ask them to do that documentation.
That's absolutely correct. They can apply themselves through, at the Department of Revenue website. I'm sure they could find information or through their tax accountant if that's the path they use.
And last week, we had 6 hours of Board of Appeal and Equalization people here, and we shared that information with everyone, I think everyone that came. So hopefully they'll benefit from that.
There's also changes going forward. So then both homeowner refunds, there'll be higher homeowner refunds in future years going forward. And the renter's refund has actually been shifted. Now it'll now be, rather than a separate form to apply for, it'll now be done through the income tax system as a refundable credit on income tax statements if you're a renter. So it means renters will both get their refunds earlier. They will also get slightly higher refunds because the income definition changes in a way that most renters will receive slightly higher refunds. And the estimates are that more people will get their refunds because oftentimes there's the take-up rate falls off because people don't apply, make the second application. And then a priority that Micah pursued and was included in the bill was an expansion of the homestead market value exclusion that has not changed since 2011. There's about a 25% increase in the amount of the maximum value that is excluded from taxation for homeowners' value. So that'll trim back on the property tax base for homeowners a bit and help provide some relief starting in 2024 and forward for homeowners.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Halls.
a quick question on the targeted homeowner refunds for fiscal year 20 or calendar year 2023. With the change in the percent increase eligibility and the maximum refund amount, is there a different form that homeowners need to fill out, or is it the same form and those changes will be applied automatically?
I'm pausing only because I want to, I can't actually, my understanding is that it's the same form and it'll be applied automatically. But I will do, it's better to have that confirmed with the Department of Revenue who administers it. So I'll make a note of that and follow up with you, but I'm pretty sure it's the same form and it's applied automatically.
Thank you.
Madam
Because the
Chair.
forms are already out there and printed, I think, so.
Commissioner Danielowski?
Thank you. Just wanted to thank for the push of increasing that market value exclusion. I think we all know, watching the market and what it's doing, and we've been informed that our average home price now is in the $350,000 range, and when it capped out before at $425,000, it definitely shows that there needed to be an adjustment to catch up with what the housing market is doing. So thank you so much and will they continue to look at that and hopefully?
Well, you're
adjustments?
welcome, and Commissioner, thank you for the question. It did not get indexed. That was so that it continues to grow. So it just got reset at a higher flat amount. I think the phase out now ends at like 511,000 something, right in that neighborhood of home value. So that will now remain fixed unless they make a change again. The way to do it would be to potentially index it, but they did not do that.
Okay, hopefully it will, because it definitely shows that in the past, your average market medium value was about 175 to 225. And so now when we see them up at 350, they really need to look at that adjustment. Thank you so much for your hard work on that.
Welcome. The senior deferral program was also expanded, so that more seniors will be eligible for that program that is administered by the Department of Revenue. And then, because it's important to all of our counties, but broadband also was funded at $125 million one time over the next 2 years for increased state money for state broadband grants. $20 million each year of that is for targeting to low-density areas. And in those low-density areas, as determined by the department, the grants can cover up to 75% of the project costs. For most grants, the project's cost threshold is only 50% of project costs. But then for all the other grants, the maximum grant size was also increased from $5 million to $10 million, depending upon the size of the project. I'm going to do one more slide, and I'm going to turn it over. And this is just this slide. We actually cover the details of it as we move forward, but I like to not bury the lead entirely. But this is a slide that shows what all of this means for Sherburne County. So you can see that just going down the list, there was also some PILT changes that actually have no impact for Sherburne County, or not significant as far as I can tell, but I somehow accidentally removed from the last slide the one-time public safety aid, which is a significant amount for counties as well. So every year, $1.5 million for county program aid for Sherburne County. On a one-time basis, about $2.2 million for public safety aid. Local housing aid, I estimate to be about $157,000. You see the CWCA SCORE grants, about 20% more than what you were receiving. And Steve will talk more about several of the next items, and I'll follow up with county probation services funding, which was also a significant win for counties. Those are only part of the wins. Nancy has a whole 40 pages of Health and Human Services to talk to you about. With that, I'll turn to Steve and Transportation.
Yes, Administrator Messel.
Before you do that, do you want to talk about the North Star operating costs? You're going to cover it? Okay.
Got it.
Or at least I'll open it up. All right. Well, thank you. Steve Novak, I handle transportation for Micah. It's always nice to be in Sherburne County. I've spent a lot of time here over the years. So let me handle transportation for you and just remind you this was a budget year, not normally a bonding year, but because we hadn't had a bonding bill in 3 years, a big bonding bill became part of the mix. And I want to take you through the budget bill and the bonding bill and all the new revenues. And I'll do that as efficiently as I can. First of all, the overall outcome of the bonding bill, which I'm going to go into more detail on later, was 2.6 billion. 1.1 billion of it was cash and 1.5 billion bonds. This year, transportation got a budget target of $1 billion. The 12 years I've been doing this, it's far and away the largest budget target transportation's ever received. And also, as a grouping, there was just under 600 million, 599 million in trunk highway bonds over 3 years, and I'll reference that later also. So over the next 4 years, on an accumulated basis, we've got 3.8 billion in ongoing dedicated revenue, which is substantial progress compared to the last probably 2 decades. So let me take you through the omnibus transportation budget bill. And the first thing of interest, I think, and of note is that about 850 million of the billion was spent in just 7 places. So there's some big impacts. Some of them positively affect Sherburne County. Let me just reference them. The first thing was there was a transfer to the Trunk Highway Fund of $152.6 million. The second thing is that right up front in the beginning of the session, they provided $316 million in matching state money to guarantee that all of the possible federal money that's going to come through the federal infrastructure bill over the next 4 or 5 years, that all the matches are met up front. Very significant. The third thing, the NLX rail line from Minneapolis to Duluth was funded at $194 million, which will allow for all of the appropriate federal matches and pretty much guarantees that this train is going to run. There was an additional $36 million for local county roads and bridges. I'll talk more about that in the bonding bill, where we have a significant gain there. $50 million for the Blue Line LRT, and an additional $40 million for Greater Minnesota Transit. And then $131.8 million in what they call named projects, what most of us old politicians refer to as earmarks, and probably the single biggest reason why a lot of this stuff passed. So it really helped out. Let me move on to detailing for you a little bit the 5 major new ways that will be increasing funding for transportation on an ongoing basis, really quite significant. The first one was tab fees. It was the one source of major income that both the House and the Senate agreed on pretty much from day one, and it'll produce $240 million for the biennium. The second one is a new fee called a delivery fee. Sometimes in the legislature you see examples. It's rare on big issues, but I think this was one of them, where one legislator can truly make a difference. And in this case, it was Representative Aaron Cagle in the north suburbs, who had studied this. One state in the country has done it, Colorado, brought it to the legislature, heard it many times in committee. It imposes a 50-cent retail delivery fee on orders over $100, distributed to what they now call the Transportation Advancement Account, and it will produce $60 million a year. The original proposal would have produced $200 million a year. It applied to all packaging, but it was amended substantially in that area as it went through the process and ended up, as I stated, a 50-cent retail delivery fee on orders over $100. The third one was maybe the surprise of the session, although historically it's where you would have thought they would naturally go, but the gas tax. And the gas tax was indexed. It indexes the motor fuel excise tax to the construction cost index, capped at 3% per year, which in fiscal year 27 would equal a 5-cent gas tax. So over the next 2 years, it will be producing $155 million. Then we go to the MVES, the motor vehicle sales tax, and that raises the rate for the motor vehicle sales tax from 6.5% to 6.875%, and that will produce $40 million. That brings us to the further transfer to 100% by 2033. the sales tax on auto parts dedication. And I think the best way to state that is that once it's annually phased in fully, it will bring in $199 million in new money. And then normally I wouldn't spend a lot of time visiting about the metro area sales tax up in Sherburne County, but it turns out that the negotiations involved in all of that, which I can tell you were extensive, Matt and I and others for many, many days on this, ended up with a 3/4 cent sales tax in the 7-county metropolitan area. 83% of it went to Metro Transit, 17% to the 7-county metro. It produces $560 million a year. But part of those negotiations for all of the increased money going to the Met Council was a negotiation to have the Met Council pick up all of the operating costs of the train systems. And in the end, that also included Sherburne County, and it should be worth $1.1 million to you. Then I'd like to go to the bonding bill. Significant, as I said earlier, $2.6 billion bonds plus cash, $1.1 billion in cash, $1.5 billion in bonds. Let me take you through the highlights, and it matches our platform, and your engineer, along with others, were intimately involved in all of this. But inside the Bowser budget is a line item for the local road wetland replacement program important to all the counties of the state. Our ask was kind of mirrored the governor's request, which was 18 million in bonds, 7 million in cash. We got about 3/4 of that, 12 million in bonds. That became the final number going forward. Then we go to the local road program, and what was received there was 78.95 million. And then in addition to that, under named road projects, which again is earmarks, an additional 146.4 million. And then an additional 18 million from the budget bill for a total of 243 million. And our platform plank called for what seemed to be an outer reach 250 million, but essentially we reached it. So we're extremely happy with that. In the 12 years I've been doing this, we've never come close to our platform request. And this year, I think it's fair to say that it was matched. Then moving to local bridges, same kind of a combination, 67 million in undesignated money for local bridges, 41.9 million in named bridge projects, in other words, earmarks, and again, an additional 18 million from the budget bill for a total of 126 million, which slightly exceeded the governor's request. And that was, his request was always the high watermark compared to the House and Senate in these categories. Then I'll just briefly touch on some other transportation-related issues. Highway railroad grade crossings, an additional 3.6 million. Port development, 18 million. Safe routes to school, 2.4 million. Active transportation, 1.2 million. Minnesota rail service improvement, 9.6 million. And an additional 3 million for Greater Minnesota Transit. And then referencing trunk highway bonds, 599 million over 3 years, fiscal years 24 through 27, 87 million for MnDOT facilities. And then a program you're familiar with, an additional 153 million for corridors of commerce, 200 million for state road construction, and again, a significant number, 166.15 in named projects, earmarks, for a total of 599 million. Last thing I'll touch on is those earmarks. One of them definitely is going to Sherburne County, your US Highway 10, $6 million in fiscal year 2024 is appropriated. So, and then finally, as I close, I just want to reference your engineer, Andrew Witter, who I know you all know what a good job he does, but he's very active in our organization. We work closely with him all throughout the year, and we appreciate you letting him do that with us. So with that, I would conclude, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions?
No, thank you for all the hard work, and I do have to say that the terminology that is used towards this transportation package is called transformational. Every time it gets discussed as to what has happened and the significance of finally trying to catch up somewhat when you are dealing with your transportation and you hear what the budget needs are compared to what the funding is, and you've got $30 billion gaps in making that happen. And I think our roads are finally showing the lack of the funding that was not helping us keep our roads in drivable condition, and dealing with MnDOT and only being in preservation mode and barely preservation mode at that due to the lack of funding. So I think this is significant to see that there's finally going to be some money put into helping us get these roads and bridges where they need to be in safer driving conditions, because we all pay the price when our roads are not in good condition, whether it be through vehicle maintenance and other issues that can happen. So I think it was a perfect storm. The potholes that developed over for this year and the definite need that something has got to happen here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Others? Okay, moving along. Thanks, Steve. Amazing work.
Excuse me, Madam Chair and Commissioners, I'm Nancy Selesky, and I handle both Human Services and Public Health for MICA, and it's a pleasure to be here with you this morning. I promise to not illustrate the 40 pages of my report that will be coming out shortly. We'll hit the high points, though. So there were a couple of huge omnibus bills. I would start with the Human Services Omnibus Bill. This is chaired by Senator John Hoffman of Champlin, Representative Mohammed Noor of Minneapolis. The bill appropriates an additional $1.35 billion in new spending to DHS in the first biennium and an additional $1.56 in the second. Included in this is the priority that we have been working on for a very long time. You've heard me talk about it for a long time. And that relates to the county cost share for folks, part of the population that awaits a bed, as an example, at St. Peter. They are sitting at the Anoka Metropolitan Regional Treatment Center. They've been deemed that they no longer need that level of care, but they're waiting for yet another state-operated bed. Once it's determined that they don't need that level of care, counties are paying the full freight of about $1,600 a day. So in the last 2022, the numbers for, in terms of the counties, we paid $22 million. And those dollars, I just want to remind you, do not go into the system. They go into the general fund. So this is something that we've been trying to bring to the attention of legislators for a long time. This year, I'm happy to say that we're going to get a reprieve, a 2-year reprieve for part of the population. And again, that is for those that are civilly committed as mentally ill and dangerous. And so that will save counties over the next biennium $13.2 million. And I know that you have a person or two that you have had significant dollars for. So I just want to mention both Amanda Larson, Tony Masters have been very involved in this process. We meet with DCT all of the time, and we're happy that this is at least a partial victory. And I also have to call out the legislators. Dan Wolgamott from the St. Cloud area represents both Sherburne and Stearns, and he has been a key part of that, as well as this year it was Senator Aaron May Quaid from Apple Valley. Related to this is the 48-hour task force. You recall that a few years ago the legislature passed language that says folks that are sitting in our jails have to be placed within 48 hours. They're there with a mental health issue. They have to be replaced at AMRTC within 48 hours. This has led to a backlog on trying to get people in and getting people out, actually. So this year, there's a task force that's been appointed. There'll be 2 county members on it. This was also being worked on by the Sheriff's Association and the County Attorneys Association. The task force will start its work on August 1st and does have a timeline for a report of February 1 of 2024. So it's going to be a pretty fast turnaround. Again, it's chaired by Attorney General Keith Ellison and DHS Commissioner Jody Harpstead. So we expect to see some activity on that, and hopefully they come up with some kind of a solution in terms of the resources that are so clearly needed in this area. I think, right? Maybe not. Maybe it isn't. It is not. Okay, so the Hoffman-Noor bill also includes, I want to mention, rate increases for a number of folks that provide direct services. And the list is there. It includes everything from day services, PCA services, disability waiver services, and a much-needed increase in the non-emergency medical transportation reimbursement rates. So that was included, again, in the Hoffman-Newer bill. Then we'll move on to the HHS Omnibus Bill, which is chaired by Senator Melissa Wicklund, Representative Tina Liebling, and also Representative Pinto has language relating to children and families in that bill. Excuse me, that bill appropriates an additional $1.4 billion in new DHS spending for the 24-25 biennium and another 1.5 in the tails. And then there's additional spending for the Department of Health as well of $283.8 million in 24-25 and $233.2 in 26 and 27. I'm going to skip over the next one because it does relate to the Metro Demo counties, which Sherburne County is not part of. So I'm going to skip over that. Contained within these two bills is the creation of two new state agencies. One is going to be the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, and the other is the Department of Direct Care and Treatment. And the plan is to take existing employees, existing resources from those existing agencies and move them into these two new agencies. So that is underway. We have not seen any details yet, but the departments are starting to work on that. The legislature did invest pretty heavily, we would say, in IT this year. This is another issue we've been working on for a long time. There's more than $130 million in investments, everything from service delivery transformation, integrated services for children and families, improved METS functionality, which of course is the software or the program that we work in. And so we're very hopeful that folks are not going to be continuing to work with the green screen technology much longer. They also put money into MMIS modernization, MNsure technology, and other things. So we're hoping that that is finally going to get underway soon. They also invested heavily in behavioral health. The first item I would mention is they put $4 million one-time money into the 988 National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. This is seed money to get it started, and then it does shift to telecommunication fees going forward after this first $4 million investment. There's additional funding for mobile crisis grants, $18 million in this biennium. They're establishing funding for tribal mobile crisis response teams, $2 million per biennium. They did put up some money for startup grants for prospective new psychiatric residential treatment facility sites of $2.2 million for the 24-25 biennium. They put money into school-linked behavioral health, first episode psychosis, and they did provide a grant of $1.6 million for the Center for Rural Behavioral Health, which is housed at MSU at Mankato. They also increased rates for mental health services. And then I do want to mention in the bonding bill, there's money for behavioral health crisis facilities totaling $10 million. Child care, another thing that we've been working on for a long time. They did reprioritize permanently the basic sliding fee and also put additional $30 million per biennium into the basic sliding fee program. They put $25 million into the Family First Prevention Act and did increase economic supports. The general assistance benefit increase is the first one in a very long time. They did increase that this year, and they did put significant money into food security. Do want to mention that they also made strong investments in public health. There's almost $25 million for emergency preparedness. They did create a 2.5 public health response contingency account, so if something were to happen again, we do have that money sitting there. They put $23 million per year into the public health system transformation, $21 million into Healthy Beginnings, Healthy Grants program. There's money for grants for lead remediation in both schools and child care centers. And there's money, $1.66 million for the next, or each year for the next biennium for the AmeriCorps Heading Home Corps. And this is for folks that are facing housing challenges. Couple of other efficiencies I just want to mention that will impact county workers. There's continuous MA eligibility for children, so that they did invest in that. The MA copays and all cost shares are actually being eliminated effective January 1st of 2024. And they did increase the MFIP housing benefit, COLA. Do want to mention that on the House side, they had proposals to look at the creation of a healthcare affordability board. They want to try to figure out where there's inefficiencies in the system. Everything from, looking at managed care, carving out or taking the managed care population and shifting it to fee-for-service. They're looking at universal health care and more. In the end, they're studying these issues over the interim, but they did put some money aside for the idea that this is something that we're going to start looking at, the public buy-in or universal health care. So more to come on that. Finally, I would just mention that early in session, I think it was March, the governor did sign a bill into law, which was $36 million to counties, and this was to unwind the public health emergency. As you know, COVID led to a lot of issues with county folks, and there's a huge backlog now of MA applications that need to be reviewed. 1.5 million have to be reviewed. So counties did receive $36 million on that. They also provided money to the DHS central office for this and to MNsure for cost sharing reduction subsidies. That is effective July 1 of this year, so you should be starting to receive your money shortly thereafter, we're hoping, or at least by the end of the year. Finally, I want to call out your staff. I mentioned both Amanda Larson and Tony Masters. Also want to mention Nicole Ruhoff and Jody Hiring, all really just a phone call away, and they're very helpful to Micah, actually all the counties as a whole. So I just want to mention that as well. And with that, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
Thank you, Nancy. Any questions or comments?
Just want to thank them for all their hard work. It's very much appreciated from the county level for our health and human services and what we provide for our county residents.
Thank you.
So I will, Carly Stark, who we work with on corrections and public safety, is not able, she had another meeting to attend to, wasn't able to join us today, but I want to first of all thank Carly and champion. She led a coalition of folks that included her work with Micah and for Micah, as well as the Community Corrections Act counties, of which Sherburne is one, and all 87 counties in a multi-year conversation that has now been successful at getting over the finish line significant changes in both increased funding and formula reforms in community corrections and probation services. This was a top priority, I think, for all counties. High on the list, the legislature did increase funding by $43 million a year. That compares to $99 million. That was the baseline, if you will, for the 87 counties for community corrections and probation services. So a significant increase. It's actually is, just to be clear, it's a little bit shy of what the county study recommended as the amount of money that was needed, but a very healthy increase in funding, about a 40% increase in funding, of which will include a significant increase, as I mentioned earlier, for Sherburne County. There's also a new formula now where all 87 counties, this is just really critical, regardless of which of the three systems that the county opts for in terms of probation services and whether they oversee both the felon caseload or just the misdemeanor caseload only, will receive funding under the same formula. There's also a Community Supervision Advisory Committee whereby the Commissioner of Corrections already has authority to give direction to how probation services happens, but this will now require that the advisory committee be engaged in those conversations with the Commissioner of Corrections in terms of advocating for the best practices and uniformity of how probation services are delivered across the state. A piece of that conversation is also There will eventually be the phase out of supervision fees, and the ability to charge supervision fees. We were not opposed to that so much as we wanted it to be funded. We're concerned that at this funding level that more money is needed from the state in order to offset those fees going forward. But we were successful on that being a phase out over 4 years. So there's some time to go back to the legislature and have that conversation. There's $4 million for armored radio grants, which is far less than what's needed for armored radio grants. I would point out and remember that part of earlier I had referenced the public safety aid that was in the tax bill on a one-time basis. That public safety aid, $88 million of that $300 million goes to counties. That money, which I think was about $2.2 million, if I'm remembering correctly, for Sherburne County, that money can also be used for armored radio grants. It's available for equipment. And then there was, I don't have the familiarity that Carly does. It will be in our post-session summaries, but there was also $70 million put into community crime and violence prevention grants of various forms for which counties will be eligible for. So a significant set of successes here in the corrections and public safety area. The other, just to to sort of checkbox a few things, that we will also be providing additional information and have been to your administrative staff. There was a one-time $1 billion housing investment money across the continuum of housing. The housing bill includes money to support increased home ownership, first-time home buyers and first-generation home buyer incentive programs to support rental assistance and rental expansion of rental housing infrastructure, mobile home park money, basically every form of shelter is receiving some additional investment in that bill. This is in addition to money that was in several places in the tax bill. It's in addition to the local housing aid that I talked about earlier. So significant investments in housing. That is one-time money in terms of the 24-25 number. And then the environment bill, I had mentioned the SCORE funding in the tax bill. Suffice it to say that there's also significant money. Well, there is also money, I should say, but for aquatic invasive species money, there's increased money for and policy related to PFAS response, including limiting some products that have PFAS in it, as well as for cleanup money. So a large environment bill that is often administered by local governments. A couple things I want to click off in general government. There was the compensation cap repeal, which was a frustration to many local governments because particularly for some key and senior positions, the legislature sort of took away from you the jurisdiction to make those decisions locally. That cap has now been repealed, so local governments will set all salaries at the local level. There's an open meeting law medical exception that was pursued by MICA that's changed, so public officials can participate from a non-public location up to 3 times per year. Significant election law changes. I want to just highlight and maybe spend more time and answer any questions that I can. There are what I would label other county impacts. So here's a list of things that we advocated to try and make modifications and adjustments to, where we were partially successful in some areas and frankly, less successful than we wanted to be in others. There's a new paid family medical leave law. The benefits will begin January 1st, 2026. That will include a 0.7, it'll start at 0.7% of salary, a premium that will be paid. The intent is for that to be shared between the employer and the employee. That will also start, the assessments will also start January 1st, 2026. This will involve up to 100 or more. I thought the number in the fiscal note might have been several hundred employees at the Department of Employment and Economic Development. This is basically like it will parallel the unemployment compensation program. So there will be a fair amount of lead time and getting up to speed on this for you as an employer, as well as for all employers in the state. And we'll keep working with your HR directors and Bruce and his team. I want to thank Bruce and Tammy Bigelow for work throughout the session on these and other things. But that will be a work in progress. The Jobs and Labor Bill also became the home for a number of other set of policy changes. There's also a mandatory earned sick and safe time, where employees must earn 1 hour of paid leave for every 30 hours worked, up to 48 hours a year, so 6 days. 6 full-time days. There is significant changes to the Public Employee Labor Relations Act, which we've also been talking to your staff about, that will have some significant impacts going forward in terms of the issues that are subject to collective bargaining potentially. And then there's also a collaborative effort that was underway for several years between local governments, between law enforcement and firefighter labor unions, as well as law enforcement and fire administrators, chiefs, to reform the para-duty disability system, such that firefighters and law enforcement officers will now have access to, but also be required to participate, particularly when presenting duty disability claims based on mental health illnesses, for up to 12-week, and it can be extended for 8 weeks protocol of a treatment protocol, with the goal of restoring the health of the employees and returning employees to work, if at all possible, before those employees would be eligible for a duty disability benefit. And then, of course, cannabis legalization, which is in our summary, includes a number of different effective dates. There's many provisions of the law that are broadly effective, that are effective July 1st. Other provisions that like the expungement that comes along of misdemeanor records begins August 1st. There's a rulemaking process that's underway. The timeline that was discussed is, the expectation is that the new Office of Cannabis Management will probably take 12 to 18 months to get administrative rules and sort of up and running, even though the legalization begins before that. Really some significant wins that were hard fought, and I have to give credit to my colleague Matt Hilgard from AMC. We partnered on some letters at the end, but this is from a bandwidth management. MICA's a much smaller organization that we worked with as a partner rather than being in the lead on, for sure. And so there is some local control that's maintained in that bill, at least around placement of where retail facilities are at and the number of retail licenses that have to be granted based on the population of the area. And then 20% of the revenue stream from the 10% gross premiums tax will be distributed across the state to cities and counties. So there is at least some modest amount of revenue sharing that's expected to grow over time as a result of that law, and to offset costs that we anticipate local governments experiencing. So that is where we ended. I would just say, back again to the state general fund budget, the legislature left $1.5 billion on the bottom line after all of that for fiscal 24-25. Hopefully, in anticipation of the 2024 session being a regular bonding bill. Even though we just talked about a big bonding bill, that bonding bill was a couple years past due from when it traditionally happens in the cycle. And so we would expect an even numbered year next year to be another large bonding year, and session starts on Monday, February 12th at noon. and happy to stand for any questions on any of those topics.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? As you've been presenting, many of our department heads have come in because we're going to be moving shortly into our budget strategic priorities discussion. So this is perfect, sets the ground for that and sets the table for our budget discussions now, which we have been ongoing all year. But I think I mentioned on the MICA call that we had last week that, and this was also part of the AMC, you know, when we were hearing this, some of us were saying, my gosh, we checked so many boxes off of our platform that have been on there for how many years? I think, Steve, you said 20 years, some of them, that we have been working on. So many of those boxes got checked. Obviously, we'll need tweaking, and we will, more needs to happen as we move forward. And I think the biggest piece, and I mentioned it to Matt when we were over in the staff lounge, just appreciate any assistance that's already happening in helping unpack this for our staff. So many policy changes, so much cash out there for different things and different programs, and it's a lot to unpack. So I know we're all still working on that, and just appreciate any support of our staff with that. So with that, I don't think we have any more questions, just to say a huge thank you for all the work that happened this year.
Well,
Yeah,
thank
I'd like to thank Micah and Matt and his staff. I mean, no matter how you look at it, until we dig into the weeds of all this, but this whole process, this is good for Sherburne County, it's good for the people, good for us. So I just want to thank you for all the hard work and everything you've done over the year. Appreciate it.
Thank you much, commissioners, and I would just leave with really inviting you as those tweaks and questions, please pass them on. That is sort of the list we start making now, as I do anticipate that a reasonable part of next session will be around any conversations of cleanup and tweaks, and this doesn't quite work for the folks trying to implement it and that sort of thing. So look forward to those feedback.
As a wise person once said, the devil will always be in the details.
Exactly.
Thank you. Okay, so that was just information-only item, so no action is needed on that report. Moving on, we'll move right on to Mr. Steve Becker with our roofing replacement and masonry report.
Morning, Board.
Good morning.
We're requesting permission to accept the two low bids, one for roofing, one for masonry for this year. We're glad to announce that we're done with both of those functions after this year. We do have some roofing coming up in a few years. We have a few more buildings that we have to look at, but the majority of our masonry is done. We have a number of small masonry jobs that we can job out locally, caulking seams that have to be redone, but nothing major. So it's been a long several years of doing this, needed to be done, but we're almost done.
Okay, great. So this is an action item before you, and so I would be open to a motion to approve and accept the McDowell roofing proposal for the sum not to exceed $90,000 and the city's masonry restoration proposal for the sum of not to exceed $76,000.
Madam Chair, I'll make that motion.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Danielowski. Is there a second?
Madam Chair, I'll second that.
Seconded by Commissioner Felber. Any other discussion?
I did have, Steve, just for some of the listening public and the new board members, could you just give us a really brief, like the amount of lack of maintenance that had been done in the past that got us to a point of
Roof sections will last between 20 and 30 years. And it wasn't necessarily that we had exceeded that period of time. Back in 2006, I started in 2016, we were kind of told, don't do a lot because something's coming down the road, and we all know what that was. So through those years, we really didn't do anything. It took us about a year to start getting back up to speed. Well, between then and the time we started doing work, we started experiencing some aggressive leaking, especially over where HHS is now Sheriff's North. The roof sections that have been replaced needed to be replaced. I don't think it was negligence, it was just, we didn't follow a schedule. And that's one of the things that myself and Dan are working on is our forecasted schedules. And we do that for a purpose. Something needs to be done, this is when it should be done, this is roughly what it's gonna cost, and we need to hold to that timeline, or you will have failures. Side note, two of the most expensive things a property owner experiences for replacing is a roof and the asphalt. So we've been doing both of those, roofing a little bit longer than the asphalt, but over the next 2 years, 24, 25, end of 25, we should be done with the asphalt replacement at this location. So we should be quite good for some time. It's just a matter of due diligence, identify what the needs are, identify the price, put it on a schedule, and then talk to the board about funding approval. I cannot put this money in my budget, so it comes from yes or land and building.
And I didn't by any means want to suggest that it was due to any ill thought or whatever. What I meant to
No.
say was how it teaches us the importance of, like what you just said.
Yes.
The maintenance, scheduling, and making sure you stick to it, because it pays you dividends back by keeping it going through the whole process and keeping the costs down as well by doing a maintenance plan.
I will say one thing about myself. I come from manufacturing, and one of my jobs was to go out and look for problems and resolve problems. Previous management didn't do that. They didn't have that expertise. So I'm always going to Dan with issues. He doesn't like to hear them, but they're reality, and oftentimes they cost. So that's something that needs to continue from now until whenever. Go out and find and try to resolve. If you can do it reasonably, cost-effectively, do that. If not, then you need to do it.
And I agree with that thought process, because we are the taxpayers. We hold this building that belongs to them, and we need to be good stewards of it for their investment in this
Right.
building.
Yeah. And I preface that because in our upcoming budget for this year, next year, and the following year, we have requests that will kind of set people back, like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? It's because we were asked to do it, and projects come up we didn't know anything about. But there are some projects that we're faced with because of the construction. And I think I've mentioned it to some of the previous board members, and I'll mention it to everyone right now. We're probably close to $175,000 to $200,000 of post-construction rework, and we are not done. So when it's all said and done, and we're, in my mind, we will be close to $500,000 of things that should have been considered more thoroughly during the construction project. So anytime we think about a construction project, we got to look at it from many different angles, because you make a decision, you don't think about it, you're going to pay for it down the road.
Okay, pulling us back to the roofing replacement. So we do have a motion and a second. Any other comments or questions on the roofing replacement? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion has carried. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Okay, and now we will move on. We are on agenda item, I believe, 6.4, 2024 budget, departmental strategic priorities discussion. Who is going to start this?
I think I'll kick this off and then turn it over to our department directors. Couple of options for you all is either the podium, or you can sit up here at the microphones here, whatever works best. Just a reminder for this board, a little bit of history. About 3 years ago, the Van County Board asked that as part of the discussion of the budget, that it not just be a mechanical look at the line items, but a more strategic view of what the departments were searching to doing or prioritizing. And within that context, the 2021-23 strategic plan, which was an update of the previous plan, was put together Today's exercise is a continuation of that with just a couple of notes. The department directors, in presenting what they see as their priorities for 2024, will indicate to you whether those priorities are resourced within what we're calling the base budget, or whether there would be additional resources needed to pursue those priorities. That obviously is a budgetary discussion, but we wanted you to have that information. In addition to that conversation, we do note that the strategic plan needs to be updated. And in fact, that's one of the administrative priorities, is to get that done. So within that context, the conversation is really about those major initiatives that the departments are pursuing to advance the strategic plan in addition to the day-to-day operations. So if you can visualize, it's the above the waterline concept of the iceberg. You know, day-to-day operations are going to continue and they're advancing the mission of the organization, but certain efforts or priorities are given to certain initiatives, and these are the ones that we're highlighting today. Obviously, the information you get today and the conversation and discussion you have will then flow into the budget presentations here next month. With that in mind, I just want to highlight, and it was in your board packet again, the strategic plan that we're operating under and going into the preparation for 2024 really focuses on strengthening our healthy, safe, and livable communities, promoting active economic growth and development, fostering appropriate partnerships and maintaining an informed public, and promoting fiscally responsible government to guarantee the public trust. And then the internal priority is to foster organizational excellence. So the department directors will also note for you in their priorities, project priorities, where they fall within the strategic plan in advancing one or more of those initiatives. With that, I'll just briefly touch on administration human resources. Tammy will take the 3 HR notes. Dan and I just noted we didn't get ours added, but we just had 2 in addition to Tammy's 3. From economic development, it's to really focus on business retention and expansion activities. And we feel that under the base budget for 2024, we are appropriately resourced to do that. And then the other initiative is to work with the county board on reviewing and updating, if necessary, the strategic plan of the organization. And then again, we feel that we are currently resourced to undertake that initiative with you, unless the board feels it's important to bring in an outside facilitator. With that, I'll ask Tammy to talk about the human resource priorities.
Good morning, Madam Chair, County Board of Commissioners. All 3 of HR's budget priorities are tied to the Fostering Organizational Excellence strategic priority, Pillar 5. Priority number 1, to develop and implement dynamic recruitment strategies in a competitive labor market to hopefully make us stand out from all those other employers that are hiring qualified candidates. Develop and implement employee retention strategies to increase job satisfaction and to reduce turnover, including but not limited to the desire to conduct an employee engagement survey every 3 years, and also to review our family health insurance contributions for 2024. And then last but not least, develop and implement workforce and succession planning strategies with an emphasis on the need to support our leaders, leadership development, and to provide accessible leadership training to our supervisors. And then also to start to unpack those new state or amended laws that you heard from Mr. Massman earlier this year that earns safe and sick leave, paid family and medical leave, and Public Employment Labor Relations Act. Only 3, but they feel a little loaded.
Any questions? Okay, thanks, Tammy.
Thank you.
And I was remiss, I should have mentioned Dan's strategy is a Pillar 2 strategy, which is promoting active economic growth, and that's the business retention and expansion one. With that, if there were no questions for Tammy or Dan and I, will move on to the county assessor.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All 3 of our goals or strategies or priorities for 2024 are included in the assessor's budget, so there'll be no additional funds required. The first one is our goal in 2024 to have all appraisal staff trained to the appropriate levels. We've had some new staff, and we're planning to get those all up and running to their correct levels of licensure to do their functions or duties, and to continue the other staff and the new staff to take on additional trainings that are appropriate for their positions. And in doing this, it will support our organizational excellence. Our second one, appraisal staff will begin again doing on-site reviews and are expected to physically review. We've been doing some remote work, and as we continue to monitor how that remote and mileage options impact the budget in a positive way and promote fiscal responsibility. And number three, in 2024, continue to work with the public service specialist staff. We are cross-training those three staff at this time. We've had one newer staff in the past year, so as they are progressing through their learning additional duties, the goal to have all three in the next couple of years doing all the functionalities of those positions, and again, to support our organizational excellence.
Okay. Any questions? Or need more information, clarification? All setting the groundwork for our budget.
She said
budgeting process.
she said the right words, no impact to the budget.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, we have identified for the County Attorney's Office 3 different objectives. One is to continue to address the caseload that we have. We have the good fortune of being able to work with every single department. We also have the burden of working with every single department, so it's a double-edged sword. As you can see, our funding sources are numerous, but I will be asking for an additional attorney. Dan tells me I'm supposed to tell you that we anticipate 2 retirements next year. So that's going to take away some individuals from us who are very learned, and that's part of the reason why we need to do that succession planning, which is the second goal from our office. The third goal is to continue to assess and identify for our training needs. Clearly, the practice of law has changed over the 20 years I've been county attorney. One of the unique things that we have available to us is we do our normal training in the state of Minnesota through the County Attorneys Association, but we also have forfeiture funds that we utilize for specialized training. We've sent people to homicide training, we've sent them to digital evidence, so that has been an opportunity that we've taken advantage of without putting that back on the levy. So I'll stand for any questions. Oh, and the pillars are safety, obviously, fostering organizational excellence, and I would also add economic development because Tim Syme from my office does work a lot with Dan on those issues.
Questions? Okay, thanks, Kathy.
Thank you.
Next, we have the county auditor treasurer. And I think Diane might be tag teaming it, right? No?
Pardon?
You going solo?
Yeah.
Ah.
Morning, Madam Chairman and Commissioners. With the number of newer staff that we currently are experiencing in our public service specialist positions in our driver's license that we're in 2023, our goal is to conduct cross-training for them to be able to assist in our election process when possible in 2024. We are also currently planning on upgrading our poll books for the 2024 election cycles. Funds have been carried over in the future election equipment line item for these costs. We're looking to see if there's going to be any state grants for election equipment that we may be able to utilize for these costs. There was some information that's just come out from our conference from last week that there's going to be some state funding that's going to be coming out. We don't know exactly which pockets that they're going to be in yet. We'll get more information on that this week on Thursday. But we're also looking to make modifications to processes and election training updates for the 2024 elections. And we're starting to focus on the presidential primary, which will be on March 5th of 2024. That's coming a lot faster than we anticipated, but it just keeps rolling. We also are planning on keep building the future election equipment fund. So when we're required to replace our voting tabulators, then their life cycle is 10 to 12 years. And right now, we're on our 7th year. We'll be in for 2024. So I just want to make sure we're planning for that for when we do have to replace. So we want to continue to foster organizational excellence and promoting fiscally responsible government to guarantee the public trust. Any questions?
Questions?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Diane.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. I am the new Director for Community Corrections, so the first time up here.
Welcome.
Thank you. The gentleman from, excuse me, the gentleman from MICA already laid some of the groundwork, which was a lot of good news. The state legislature, as you know, passed the 2023 Public Safety Omnibus with revisions to state funding and the formula for probation services by the counties. This bill is historic on two fronts. It's a cooperative effort by the three delivery systems to provide equitable services and programming for individuals no matter where you live throughout the state. I say that because we transfer people all the time from county to county and they come to us, so it's really valuable that all counties now have the guidelines to provide the services that we provide here. The second one is equitable funding for these counties throughout the state as they've been underfunded, as you know, for many years. Although the bill did not get fully funded, there was a significant increase for Sherburne County, where our subsidy was around $886,000. This year it's $3.2 million in change, which is a $2.3 million increase from the previous year. But with most things, with increased funding comes increased demands and requirements. These requirements are written into the legislation and aimed at ensuring that increased funding is being utilized for the purpose in which it was approved. So to improve community supervision and services, to ensure that those services and resources, again, are available throughout the state, no matter who is providing them. Our largest new task will be in the way of data and outcomes and how they're tracked, what gets reported to the state, and consistently having outcome data in regards to programs we're providing, recidivism data, restitution, employment, and other areas of data that will be requested in our annual reporting. The major financial impact that the legislature session has given us, as the gentleman also indicated earlier, is that we will have probation fees will be sunsetting around August 1st, 2027. So we need to be strategic in what that looks like down the road. The goals I'm submitting today are long-term investments to strengthen a healthier, safer, and livable community. These are the pillars. Promote fiscally responsible government to guarantee the public trust and to foster organizational excellence. So the first and third goal are really tied into what I was talking about with the new funding. So the request is for 2 additional full-time staff that will help address community needs, meet supervision standards to respond to the new data requirements by the Department of Corrections. This request will be fully funded with non-levy dollars by utilizing the Department of Corrections subsidy. I'll go down to goal number 3 to begin to assess the elimination of supervision fees in 2025. This request will be fully funded, non-levy dollars by utilizing the Department of Corrections subsidy. And going back to goal number 2, that is not tied into the bill. What I discovered as this is why I said I was the new director. As a new director, I discovered there was some confusion about our promotional process. So what I would like to do is I would like to solidify that, solidify a career officer cap number and create a new promotional process. Reclassify 3 current probation officer positions to 3 career probation officer positions. This, again, will be fully funded with non-levy dollars. So what that does is it gives us a little bit of space that when we have an employee that is excellent and they go through our process, we have some promotional opportunities. It was the understanding of the previous director that that was unlimited, and now we're going to cap that to 10 instead of possibly 20. So that would be the request. Any questions?
Madam Chair,
Danielewski.
thank you. I just have one question. So it's the state's thought that by increasing the funding for community corrections, that the goal is to be able to eliminate fees, which I'm sure went into place because if you did something negative and it required you to have supervised release, or however that would work, that should not fall to the taxpayers to supplement that process. So is this going to be kind of like a study, if that's really going to be the reality based on what it is the funds are going to pay for? So this is potentially going to happen maybe, but if there still is not enough money coming in, but this amount going out, we would still have to maybe utilize some fee capacity, I'm assuming.
Yeah, Commissioner. Basically, we submitted our numbers. Every county submitted their numbers earlier this year when the negotiations were going on. It was anticipated, I guess, that those fees would be brought into the funding. They decided to put that aside for this year and readdress it hopefully next year. That is why I am not advocating that we get rid of fees today, because if they're going to come back to us and say, what are your fees? And we're saying, well, they're zero at this time, because some counties have eliminated fees. I would like to go back to the state and say it's whatever sum of money, right, that we would be needing from the state to compensate for eliminating fees. And right now, Commissioner, we're just talking about supervision fees. There's other fees for drug testing, for monitoring services and things like we would have to pay out of pocket. So at this point, we're not talking about those, we're just talking about the supervision fees.
Okay, and did they put an escalator and indexing to inflationary factor on the money going forward?
Not on the 43 million.
Okay. More to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Corey.
Good morning. For Health and Human Services, all Health and Human Service priorities really align with Pillar 1, which is to strengthen our healthy, safe, and livable community. My last two objectives really align with Pillar 4, fiscally responsible, while also working on our Pillar 1 strategies. So first one is to prioritize the safety and well-being of children and families by investing in necessary infrastructure for child protection, child welfare, and children's mental health. This is really an underfunded mandate, which you're going to have the opportunity to hear more about in today's workshop. Number 2 is to continue to prioritize prevention and early intervention as a driving factor in delivering our services, really working diligently to keep individuals and families out of crisis and then serving people in the most cost-effective manner. Currently, we do this a lot with our grant funds, but it is resource constrained because anytime that we divert resources away from deep end services to prevention, there's only a finite amount. So trying to move that pendulum over to prevention and early intervention. And then number 3, I heard a little bit about it today from Nancy, manage the massive healthcare unwinding process, really helping to minimize client wait times, both in office and on the phone, and also reducing to avoid disruptions and gaps in services. This is partially funded, so we did get a very small one-time allotment through the legislative appropriation, and then, but this is really going to show a cost savings. Anytime people fall off healthcare, that creates huge county costs in unnecessarily hospitalizations and other costs down the road. So, any questions with 3 priorities?
No?
I had one real quick question, Madam Chair.
Okay.
What is our timeline again? Can you remind me when we have to have everybody recertified or whatever the terminology is you're using to get back on program?
Yep. So the healthcare unwinding is through a 12-month process, and so our first notices started to go out in April. The first batch, if you will, needed to return their paperwork and eligibility forms in June. There's many thousands that have not, and so they will fall off effective July 1st. And so I think there was just recently an NPR article about the number of people falling off, and so we're doing outreach and whatnot, but right now our wait times, if you call into the Health and Human Services, about 20 to 45 minutes, and people who come in for an in-office visit is about an hour. So really trying to do as much prevention and outreach, aligning if somebody's on public programs to reach out to their social worker to get that person advance notice, but so far, we're not seeing it, so.
So we're on track to be part of, they're gonna figure it out once it's not there. And then they're
Yeah.
gonna be in.
Without medications and
Yeah.
then unpaid
Then
medical
they'll be in
appointments and
frantic
health waiver
mode.
programs, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
So we're on track for the norm
Yeah.
of that thought.
Hopefully we can steer the ship a little. Again, this is just our first month, but it is a 12-month process. And then just to remind you that our healthcare enrollees have essentially doubled since pre-pandemic levels.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Amanda. IT.
And Brian is out, so Dan's going to be presenting for IT.
Good morning again, Commissioners. All four of these initiatives are under organizational excellence and fiscal responsibility. The first is cybersecurity. We've spent a lot of our ARPA dollars on cybersecurity, and we're also getting some funding from the state. We don't know the parameters of that funding yet, so that'll be one of our priorities, is dig through that and see how we can utilize those funds. Second is website improvement for citizens. We have not updated our website since 2018, so it's been 5 years. That coordinated with the building opening, so we think it's time. We've actually formed a staff committee to start looking at that, and then we'll bring the department heads and the board into that discussion as well as that project moves forward. Our IT also has a continue the cloud first approach. Moving things to the cloud allows for a much steadier budgeting. You don't have those one-time capital blips that typically come when you house IT infrastructure. And the last is the phone system refresh, which was also an ARPA request. That'll be coming back to the board as we move through that process as well.
Okay. Questions? Commissioner Danielowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just curious, when you're forming this committee, to look over the website and its ease of usability, would it maybe be helpful to get a couple outside people that are just, sometimes we get in our own bubble and you get to understand, whereas you have a new person or someone who's not as familiar. How well do they navigate our website?
Absolutely, we could build that into the process.
Others?
Thank you.
Yes. I have challenges with our website, so I'm thrilled. Parks, Gina.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. So our strategic budget priorities all address the pillar of strengthen our healthy, safe, and livable communities. And they were all born out of the year-long plus process of doing the Parks and Trails Comprehensive Plan, which Commissioner Phobie and Commissioner Danielowski were engaged with throughout. So our first priority is Big Elk Lake Parkland development, which would include completion of building deconstruction and removal. And this would be in continued coordination with the zoning office. Dave and the solid waste staff have invested quite a bit of time to date, and their expertise has been invaluable. So we'd hope to continue working with them on that. This budget priority would also continue to restore the native plant communities. That is fully funded through a Lessard-Sam Outdoor Heritage Commission fund, grant fund. And then to begin the phase 1 development of the park features that will accommodate passive outdoor recreation and provide a space that educates the visitors on the cultural and contemporary history of our communities on that landscape. So this would include deconstruction contract and the tribal monitoring associated with that process, as well as a match for a $3 million legacy grant. And it is currently unfunded and would pose an additional levy request of $600,000. Our second priority is to increase staffing by adding 1 full-time employee to meet the increased maintenance and natural resource management needs of the additional 430 acres that was added to the park system with the Big Elk Lake acquisition. That more than doubles the parkland that the county was managing prior to acquiring that land. The additional full-time person will specifically focus on ecological and vegetation management needs of the county park and trail facilities. The position will be responsible for planning, coordinating, and implementing the natural resource management to enhance oak savanna, manage prairie, and control invasive species. And this position will also provide support for trail grooming in all seasons and general park maintenance in all seasons. So this budget request would cover the new position salary for 2024, a pickup, and office equipment. It is currently unfunded and presents an additional levy request of $130,000. Our third priority is to construct a permanent vault restroom at Grams Park to support the large park improvement project being constructed during 2023. Grams is, again, you've heard this before, the most visited park in the county park and trail system. The average annual visitor numbers since 2019 is 47,000. The new construction will increase parking from 8 spaces to 50 and will add a 50-person capacity picnic shelter. And the new large accessible nature playscape will attract more families to visit the park, and a vault restroom, a 2-unit vault restroom is recommended to support the improvements, the use trends, and the anticipated increase in park visitors. This is a capital investment that is currently unfunded and poses an additional levy request of $300,000.
Okay, thanks, Gina. Questions, comments?
One quick question on so that's a $300,000 request to help support the build of the vault restroom?
Yeah.
So is this a one-time?
That's a one-time, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Others? Okay, thanks, Gina.
Thank you.
Planning and zoning. Dave Lucas.
Lynn is not here today, so I'm standing in. So planning and zoning priorities fall under, well, the three pillars are foster organizational excellence, strengthen healthy and safe communities, and stewards of public trust. Our priorities are to complete the comprehensive land use management plan. That is, HKGI is doing a good job. Mark in our office is overseeing that. We hope to have that completed sometime late this summer, fall. Next, we are right now with the, thank you, Public Works. The Public Works GIS staff is working on creating a new replacing our archaic permitting program. And we looked, when we first realized that program needed to be replaced, we went out on bids and we were getting estimates back at excess of $300,000. GIS is doing that in-house, so that's saving a significant amount of money. So thank you. We hope to have that done January of 2024. Next is to anticipate redoing our zoning ordinance as a result of replacing our land, or redoing our comp plan. Overall planning and zoning budget, our goal is always to be levy-free, to use license and permitting fees and solid waste monies. So we don't see that changing for the 2024 budget.
Okay.
Any questions?
Thanks, Dave. Okay. Yeah, this department has always been supported itself on
Yes.
with fees and solid waste. So thank you.
All right.
Okay, property maintenance. Steve?
Hello again, board. Dan asked me to whittle down the list. It was much longer. Ours are basically project-related, and they fall into two categories: projects that we're aware of and projects that we were asked to participate in. Number 1 and number 4 are projects that were more or less requested from IT and IS services. We have a plan working with an external contractor, engineering firm, to identify a means of cooling IDF spaces in the judicial building. Those are 3 rooms that are tied into the entire central system. So if we want to cool those rooms on the weekends, we have to run the entire building. And if a judge wants their room cooled, we got to run the entire building. So there are some advantages of pulling these small spaces off and putting independent systems on there. IT requested during construction that this was part of the plan and never materialized. So another one of the projects that we're doing a catch-up on. We'll be doing more asphalt repairs, lighting in detention. We are making progress there. We did one project already. We're going to try to do a couple more. We did one last year. We replace a lot of lamps there every year, a lot of labor with these new LEDs, or a lot of big cost savings, labor savings. We talked about number 4, purchase fleet vehicles. We know our fleet is aging. When issues came along in 21, we were idling most of the fleet. We had no idea how things were going to turn out, so we just sat on cars. Now it's time to start getting rid of some. We purchased 3 new Ford Escapes. We're going to be selling some. We're going to purchase some more next year, and our fleet will be refreshed the next couple of years. And we still have hot water heater issues, and we're trying to resolve those. Replacing a single hot water heater ranges between $25,000 and $30,000.
Okay. Questions, comments, more information you need? Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Public Works.
Morning, Madam Chair, County Commissioners. We'll hit on these briefly. They're very similar to our priorities from last year. We have made significant progress on a number of them, and then we've got a couple of them that we're going to continue to do work on in the coming year. So first one really focuses on pillar number 1, creating a healthy, safe, and livable community that is continuing to work towards funding the Zimmerman interchange at County Road 4 and 169. So we've made great progress on that. We're nearing the finish line and continue to work through final design and establishing what that project really is going to look like at the end of the day. The second item is continuing to look at our Zimmerman Public Works facility. We had an opportunity to talk about that a little bit last week. What does it really want to look like and need to look like over the course of the next 5 to 10 years, and what that might entail moving forward. So we'll continue to dig into that. We do have a spatial study that has been completed in regards to that site, but need to further refine some of those items and take a look at some of the options that we do have. So that really falls under pillar number 5, fostering organizational excellence. The last 2 are interrelated, but really focus on the connectivity between Trunk Highway 10 and I-94, and creating both a safe and healthy, livable community, but also promoting that economic activity and growth in that area. We've heard over the past number of years that it's a highly developable area should that connectivity between 10 and 94 exist. So item number 3 is really making sure the roads are under the correct jurisdictional ownership between the county and state. Looking at a road transfer, road swap with MnDOT, so we'll continue those discussions. And then the last one is really starting to take a look at what an interchange wants to look like on currently Trunk Highway 10 and County State 8 Highway 11. As you're aware, we did submit that project for Corridors of Commerce funding. Might have been a little bit premature, but again, it gets it on the radar screen, and we've been continuing to have discussions with MnDOT in regards to that project. So with that, I'll open it for any questions.
Questions? We spent a whole day with Andrew last week, and so got a lot of updates, so thanks.
You're welcome
for that.
Thank you.
And he took us on a lot of bumpy roads that need a lot of help.
County Recorder, Michelle.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Go over my 3 budget priorities briefly. Each of these touch on both pillar number 5, fostering organizational excellence, and also pillar number 4, promoting fiscally responsible government. Number 1 is the complete the implementation of an OCR project. Again, we have signed a contract and paid a fee for that, and soon we'll be in the testing phase of that. This project has been fully funded with non-levy dollars by using the Recorder's Technology Fund. And again, that's a technical advancement for our office. Number 2 is also another technical issue. This will be to implement ICRIS, or ICRS, an Inter-County Recording System. And I'm currently working with other departments in order to realize an efficient way to electronically record county-generated documents that come from other departments. This will benefit multiple departments, and again, this is also fully funded through non-levy dollars of the Recorder's Technology Fund. And then the last one is just to ensure that we have enough passport acceptance agents on hand. I checked the numbers recently, and pre-COVID, we are exceeding all passport acceptance numbers. They're coming in record numbers. I had a retirement in April, and I've kept that position open, so we've realized some salary dollar savings there, but the time is right for that position to be filled here. Again, this will provide quality service and meet advertised hours of passport acceptance, and this is funded under the base 2024 budget. Any questions? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. Veteran Services, Bruce.
Morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. We also have just 3 short objectives. One is community outreach, operations, and then accreditation in education. I believe that these 3 touch all 5 pillars in some form or fashion through whether it's 1, 2, or 3. So our first is community outreach, which we already started. This year, we started going up to Talahi and St. Cloud. We have about 3 homes up there. In addition to the, I want to say it's under economic development, we have visited a business basically in the area, and to try and reach the employees that are veterans there to see how that is, positive, which it was. And we're looking at doing another larger business in Big Lake here in the future. That I believe falls under strengthening our healthy and safe and livable community. Our second is the operations, which to review our procedures and how we're literally operating, to see if we can operate to the fullest function that we have based on the workload and the manpower and things of that nature, which the report, the federal report just came out, and just from last year to this year, we went from 78 million to 91 million in revenue brought to the county. So, and that's about half and half, medical and disability. So that, I believe, falls under the promoting an economic growth, as well as fostering appropriate partnerships and maintaining an informed public and promote fiscally responsible government. And the last is our accreditation and training. Like other departments, we need to maintain our accreditation with certain state and federal agencies so that we maintain our access to those computer systems to better serve our customers and their casework. And I believe that last just comes under fostering organizational excellence. So that is our short and kind of sweet overview.
Okay,
Are there
thank
any
you.
questions?
Any questions?
Yeah, on expanding the operations, which one do you think is gonna work better? Going into the Maple Room or taking the Oak Room?
Well, right now, when we made our space over here, the architects or whoever built it said, yes, this is how much room you would need, but once we moved in there, and once we've had multiple disabled vets coming in wheelchairs, but the only thing that was, I guess, kind of on track was having the 36-inch door for a wheelchair to get into, but unless you don't have anything inside those rooms, they may work, but once you put a desk and a chair in there, it limits that space without burdening that individual, either, backing in, getting out, using their walker and things of that nature. So it's just a topic that I'd like to address and see what options there are, that's all.
Yeah, we could figure out which one, because if we don't have wheelchair access for those guys, we gotta get this done, soon. And whichever one is gonna work the best, then we'll have to work around that. That's just really important.
Oh, and again, the architects that laid it out said that was in compliance with ADA, but again, I think it's just when they put in an open room, just 10 by 10. Well, they're not taking into consideration furniture, and they're supposed to be the experts. So,
Yeah, board members, if you haven't been in that office, I'd encourage you to stop by. You're in a very tight space. Yes. So, others?
Just a quick question. Even though it's an improvement from the previous tight space,
Tighter
even
space.
tighter space,
You were working.
you obviously still are having constraints. So yes, we definitely need to support that. One real quick question on the parking for designated clients. Are you just looking to identify some of the handicap parking spaces as veteran only?
I am. Before we used to be right inside door B as in boy or Bravo. And we've had a lot of comments from veterans that are walking from, even though some may have handicap stickers, some don't. And those that don't are just elderly veterans, and, they're having to either get, dropped off or walking from the parking lot of this facility. So we'd just like to see if we can accommodate our elderly folks, so.
All right, thank you.
I can't imagine why that can't happen. So I hope that would just happen. Yeah. So,
Thank you.
okay, thanks, Bruce.
Okay.
County Sheriff.
why not, we can overachieve this morning. Morning, Madam Chair, board members.
We've got a PowerPoint?
Well, I didn't know what to expect.
Gosh. Sit
So,
back,
We set the
relax.
bar for next year, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Just so long it's not the PowerPoint like Felix's retirement.
Right. So our first strategic priority is to continue our co-responder program. I think Roy Newman has presented in front of the board before. That funding runs out in 2023, so there is a gap in funding for the last quarter. We plan to use some of the opioid dollars or public safety aid from the state of Minnesota to fill that gap in 2023, moving into 2024. Just a couple of quick things as to the importance, livable community. In the last 23 months since the program, the co-responders de-escalated 100 individuals that were suicidal, and then also provided aid to 274 children that were experiencing trauma. So great partnership with HHS and the county's mental health action team. The second priority would be to continue to address the health and wellness of law enforcement. And what we'd be proposing for the next budget cycle is a mandatory 1-hour counseling session for public safety. I think you heard earlier this morning talk about para reform and PTSD and its effect on law enforcement. We would make it mandatory hour each year, which would reduce the stigma as to why you're meeting with the counselor. Has been well received by staff, and also the unions are in support of it. So we'd propose to use non-levy dollars for this program as well. More to come during the budget workshop. The other strategic priority we have is addressing the ongoing levy dependence on jail staffing through the jail enterprise. For some of the commissioners that have been around a while, we have presented this at every board budget workshop. And this is removing the staff out of the enterprise fund that would be needed just to operate a county jail. So we understand the pressures of the levy, and it's a work in progress and probably will be for the next 10 to 12 years. And our last strategic priority is to complete the backup dispatch center at the Zimmerman Public Safety Center. As the board recalls, this was an ARPA approved funded. It will have regional impact or countywide impact. It will benefit all the citizens in the county and all first responders, law enforcement, sheriff's office, ambulance, and fire. Those are the 4 strategic priorities moving into the next year for the Sheriff's Office. That stand for any questions.
Any questions?
No, I do have one comment. I'm pretty happy to see that they're moving ahead with another, I mean, to be able to try to keep the post-traumatic stress injuries from becoming post-traumatic stress disability. I mean, that's just something that it's good to see that overall we're getting better at in the long run. So that's really good stuff.
Thank you, Commissioner.
And very nice PowerPoint. Thank you.
So any questions or comments overall?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Halls.
we didn't think we were going to get away with me not talking.
No, I was shocked you haven't
I've
talked
been,
yet.
I noticed I've been quiet.
You have been quiet today.
All right, so a couple of comments overall. First of all, I want to thank everybody for all their work, because there clearly a lot of work went into all of these objectives and priorities, and I think everybody did a very nice job on putting those together. A couple of comments overall. I've been very pleased since I've been here around the lean initiatives that we have seen and lean training through the organization. My experience is that that is a difficult thing to integrate into the culture of an organization. What I would humbly suggest is, in addition to all of these initiatives and strategic ideas, I would like to see each department also have lean initiatives associated with them, cost reduction projects that each department would like to take on, and then have that as part of their strategic initiatives to help drive that as part of the culture of the organization, both both a culture of accomplishing the mission, but also a culture of continuous improvement and becoming more efficient with the taxpayers' dollars. I hope that makes sense. To me, that would really align with pillars 4 and 5 in the overall strategic plan. I also really appreciate the fact that almost everything that we talked about today was non-levy dollars. I think given where we are, I really appreciate the fact that that has been a focus. I realize we're not approving necessarily anything today. This is information only. I will say, I think there was one area around parks where it looked like about a $1.3 million ask to the levy. I would be personally a little reticent on that large of an increase to the levy. However, that being said, about $1 million of those dollars, as I added them up, were one-time expenditures. And so I'm wondering if there aren't grant opportunities to cover those, because those were specific one-time expenditures around the new park at Elk Lake, one-time expenditures around the purchase of a vehicle, and one-time expenditures around Graham's Park. So if that's an opportunity, I would like to see that fleshed out further, rather than putting it on the levy. As we all know, once something's on the levy, it tends to stay on the levy forever. So those are my overall comments.
Okay, thank you. Others? General comments?
Thank you for all the hard work that you do. I mean, it's a lot of time spent trying to figure out how to make the whole thing work.
Yeah, and I just want to say it's a thank you to everyone in the department heads for doing everything. And it's not an easy situation we're in, because I think every department's part of the whole process in the machine, and it's all the cogs have to be there to make this whole thing work. And yeah, we're going to struggle with some things, but yes, we're going to make from my standpoint, I think all of you know where I stand, and that we all need to fund this to continue to pursue and provide the services that the county needs and is expected of our residents. So thank you.
Commissioner Danielowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just an overall thank you. I did ask some questions throughout, but I do appreciate everybody's efforts and what they do for us as a county and what they do for our residents. And I appreciate all of your thoughtfulness and efforts to work to make this as minimally impactful to the budget as possible. And it's always been recognized, speaking for myself, your efforts towards that. So thank you.
So and this kind of sets the table. It helps set the table. We have our budget workshops are in about a month, a little less than a month. We'll be gathering again. And I think I really appreciate this practice. I'm not sure how often you each get to hear the priorities in everyone else's department. So I was thinking about that today. How much do you sit and listen to the sheriff's PowerPoint or, picking on Joel.
Yeah.
But to be able to listen to each other and see what's going on and see the priorities in each other's department, I think is real beneficial. We don't do that during budget workshops. You come in one at a time with the board. So this sets that table for us. And now in about a month, we will, tighten it up a bit and be in our budget workshop. So I appreciate all the work that went into today to prepare us. Anything else? Administrator Messelt.
It's also important to note that this is probably a good exercise because it's also unfiltered. Since it's strategic, it's not gone through any kind of a winnowing process where when the budget comes, Dan and I will try to prioritize the budget a little bit more. But I think it gives you an idea of where the organization and the leaders of the organization would like to go. And hopefully that aligns with your strategic thinking. And again, this fall, when we get to the strategic plan for '24, we'll have this in mind. So thank you for your time today.
Yeah, and some of this came out of, a few of us were sitting at a workshop one day that said your budget, your county budget is kind of your moral compass. Where are your priorities? Where do you want your priorities? It's much more than dollars and cents. It's a moral compass and a plan of how you want to serve your public. So that was a number of years ago that a few of us commissioners were at there to think of the budget much more than just the dollars, of how are we best serving our public. So thanks for that. And I think that's it for this agenda item. So thanks for all of you for being here. And the room will clear.
We'll go back to work.
And that are done then with agenda item number, all the items under our regular agenda. And I forgot to bring my egg timer for commissioner correspondence, committee reports, and upcoming meetings.
We're gonna be on an egg timer now.
Yes.
She gets
Our egg
one
timer.
3 seconds left.
Yes, we are about a half an hour over, so just keep that in mind. We have a number of workshops ahead of us. So
I can
what
talk fast.
have the commissioners been up to?
I'll go first.
Gary?
In the essence of time, this will be quick. June 7th, I was at the XL Energy Open House with the transmission lines. June 8th, Soil and Water Conservation Board meeting. June 9th, Equity Inclusion meeting in Sartell. June 12th, the AMC District 5 meeting. June 13th, Technology Steering Committee, also the Board of Equalization, which we all spent 6 hours at. Lisa and I taped the Soil and Water Conservation podcast on June 14th, which was great. Went to after I got logged in, the XL Energy Stakeholder meeting on the 14th, the county road tour with Andrew on the 15th, and planning and zoning meeting on the 15th that evening. That was me.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Greg?
Yeah, so the 7th, was adding to the NACO public safety thing. Probably the most interesting that came out of that is there's some really good swift water rescue and water rescue training. I mean, they've actually got portable tanks out there using for water rescue training from vehicles, because 76% of drownings are vehicle involved, so there's some really good things going there. There's some new FEMA grants that are out there that are really great. I sat through a CFR, a Council for Foreign Relations thing on COVID-19. That was really interesting. We've already talked a lot about that today, so there's not a whole lot more to cover. Towards zero death stuff, my weekly update, our deaths are down a little bit, but we're and it's about the same type of things we've been having: alcohol-related, speed-related, unbelted deaths are the things, and motorcycles are still up. The Sherburne County Corrections meeting, we already talked about that a lot today here in their update. Metro Emergency Services Board, we talked a little bit about Armor here, but also they are doing a statewide survey of users on the system, and they're getting that funded by, apparently there's a fund from Hennepin County that they're able to use for this, that they just use the interest for it. So once again, it's really good use of public funds to try to figure out how to save other public funds in the long run, which is a very important thing. And I think that was a pretty quick synopsis. Cut out a lot of words in what I had written down.
That was 2 minutes. I had the Great River Regional Library Subcommittee. We have a new subcommittee on collections policy revisions. I had a TRICAP meeting with the executive director, and she has announced her retirement. Lori Schultz will be will be moving on to another position. She took the executive director position with MinCap. So, since I chair that board, that puts me heading up an executive director search with the executive committee. So stay tuned with that. I met with the executive committee to start laying the groundwork for that search. Central Minnesota Jobs and Training, had 3 different meetings with them: Community and Government Relations, Workforce Development Board, as well as our Joint Powers Board. They've got a training coming up June 28th. If anyone knows of anyone who's justice involved individuals, people that have a hard time finding jobs because of possibly a background that's not favorable, this is in Cambridge. And if you just know of anyone who's trying to find employment and is kind of lost or unable to open certain doors because of reasons that aren't pleasing in their background, CMJTS is a great resource for them. AMC, we had the District 5 meeting, our Board of Appeal and Equalization meeting, the podcast recording that was referenced for Soil and Water. Elk River Chamber has started a Zimmerman component, so the Zimmerman business community met, and Amy Lord with Elk River Public Schools was there talking about their community and technical education and partnerships with schools, and they do amazing work. I had a MICA meeting, you heard that all today, and the road tour, among many other things.
All right. I had a law library interviews on June 8th, and stay tuned. Judge Kaminsky will be making further announcement on that. APO meeting in St. Cloud. On 6/12, the AMC district meeting up in Sauk Rapids. 6/13, had our ad hoc election review meeting, and also the County Board of Equalization marathon meeting. I'm going to rename it that. 6/15, our county EDA meeting. We did a really, had a good presentation on some of the needs that are being dealt with in regards to childcare needs and people that would be in the workforce, but for the childcare, it's the lack of that and also affordability that seem to be the barrier. So we're exploring that. Attended the county road tour with Public Works Director Andrew Witter. Also had numerous calls with staff for reviewing meetings and calls to address resident issues. And also been working with on a family resource center with HHS and the Big Lake School District. So really excited about some of those possible opportunities. That's it.
And I'll make it fast. On the 8th, I spent the morning with HHS. I want to thank Amanda and her team for hosting me that morning. It was an excellent morning and time well spent. 13th, I had the elections committee meeting, and I think that's making very good progress. Really appreciate everybody's participation. The afternoon, we had the technology steering committee, and then of course that led into the Board of Equalization, which we were all at. On the 15th, we also had our EDA, Economic Development meeting, and I think we finished off the strategic plan there, and I think that's come along very nicely with Jessica and all her work on that. And then we had the road tour on the projects for the county and a couple of constituents calls. That's what I did.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Summer lightens up a bit, but then again, it doesn't. So now we will recess our regular meeting and take about a 5-10-minute break. So let's reconvene at 12:10, and we will move into our ditch authority meeting at that point.
12:10 or 12:05?
12:05, thank you. so we are going to reconvene and open our ditch authority meeting. And the first item on here is to approve the meeting agenda, so I need a motion to do that.
So moved.
Commissioner Hulls moves,
I'll second that.
seconds Commissioner Felber. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion has carried. And then we will move on to the report, the Ditch Authority's report. Welcome, Mike.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Any questions before I get started on my PowerPoint? As far as the written report?
Doesn't appear to be.
This is ditch 28. This is an area that, last meeting, it was in really flooded. The upstream, that more than I've ever seen in the 13 years that I've been doing this job. And we pretty much narrowed it down to another tree root problem. On this 12-inch tile, it is corrugated, dual wall corrugated. It's non-perforated because at this point, all it is a conveyance system. There's really no need for any drainage here. It's high and dry. So you wouldn't think that you'd have all these tree root problems, but at every single joint, there was a problem. You can see that riser right behind the trailer. So that's the location of the tile, and it was just being inundated with trees. This one's right over the top of where the tile is. We spent about 7 or 8 hours clearing trees and brush, and just so we could get through there. There's another tree, a big one. You can see the gap in the trees across the road. That's where the tile comes out. So it's looking like we're gonna have to go all the way to the road. This is after we removed a bunch of the plug tile lines. Left it an open ditch so it could drain out. We wouldn't have to, when we replace the tile, you wouldn't have to deal with so much water. That glob right there is a tree root mass that came out of the joint. There's another one. Pretty much perfectly round, about the same size as the pipe, so you can imagine why it wasn't draining much water. This is what they used to join the 20-foot sections of pipe. This is called a coupler. You're supposed to zip tie it together with zip ties, so it has a really nice tight seal. Well, they didn't do that. So it wasn't a problem for the roots to get in there, and once they get in there, they just keep growing and growing and growing. And a year like last year, where it was pretty much a drought like it is now, that's where the tree roots go, and they look for the water, and the water's always in that tile. Ditch 30, all operations are complete on the clean out. Spoil piles are leveled. Cleared a bunch of trees, bunch of brush. Turned out pretty nice. Now the next time that they go to clean this ditch, which will be probably past my time, they will be able to go in and clean the ditch and won't have to worry about clearing a bunch of trees and brush. There's some of the wood the landowner wanted. There's another picture of it, a pretty good pile. Down at the end of the field, down the ditch, there's another pile too. So they wanted the firewood. This is down at the very end where we cleaned. You can see the landowner decided to do some landscaping with our ditch bank. It's full of ferns and hostas. Looks pretty nice. And it's really good stabilization too. That stuff really holds the ground. There's the spoil pile that we leveled on the edge of his yard. So there's a nice clear open path now. Couple beaver dams, ditch 15. We trapped a beaver out of there. He broke the dam, the trapper, and never built it back. This is setting up the charges south of County Road 61, just west of County Road 20. That's Tanner, our youngest engineering tech. I volunteered his services to help Jeff carry out some equipment and charges and help him get this thing going.
That's great.
I bet he was thrilled.
I'm like, put the waders on. He's like, what? I'm just here to watch.
Was that more like voluntold?
So I got a couple videos of the charges going off.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it does a really good job. No mess to clean up. Don't have to mobilize a backhoe. It's much cheaper and more efficient.
Okay. Wow.
This is on the north end of 40th Street. That culvert was replaced by the township last year. It's just north of the culvert. That was just 3 charges, just to get rid of the rest of the dam that the trapper didn't pull.
Nice.
So, that's all I have. Any questions or comments?
Any questions or comments? Okay, then we do need to act on this, accept the ditch drainage technician's report.
Madam Chair, I'll make that motion then.
I'll second that.
Commissioner Danielowski moves, Commissioner Gray seconds. Any other questions or comments? Thanks, Mike. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion has carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the next item, to consider and approve payback to the general fund.
Good morning, Madam Chairman, Commissioners. Before you is a report of the individual ditches that we have determined the amounts that we can pay back to the general fund. As you know, like at the end of the year, if there is a deficit in our ditch funds that we have to advance from the general fund. So with this payback, once approved for these individual ditches and stuff, with a total amount of the $15,022.96 that's getting paid back, we will have our balance that's still due from the individual ditches to our general fund of $4,457.70. This is dramatically reduced from, it was close to 300,000 before, so we're definitely on the right track of getting things taken care of and reducing that liability that the general fund has for the ditch funds. So that's my request, is to pay back the general fund for the advances that were made earlier to cover any of those overdrawn ditch accounts.
So this is an action item. We need a motion.
So moved.
Motion's made by Commissioner Hulse,
I'll second that.
seconded by Commissioner Felber. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion has carried. Thanks, Diane.
Thank you.
With that, we will close the Ditch Authority meeting. We will not be taking another break unless someone really needs a break. I think we keep moving. And so we will open our workshop, but we probably need a little time.
Do you want tables out? We can just swing one. It's really half. Just can you teach us one, 3? Yeah, we can just use one table, so we'll get her out here.